measuring some of the quantitative impact of the program. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Please feel free throughout to just, stop me and ask questions for clarification, or if you want to add anything. And then we'll break it up into two pieces. So I'll present one study first on our work on studying the innovation within the Clean Sweep program. And then we'll talk about that in some depth. I want to, getting your feedback. And then I'll present the results of our quantitative work measuring the impact of the Clean Sweep program on crime reporting and reporting to 311. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Some stuff so I can see. There we go. Great. So it's really my pleasure to be able to share the results of our study with all of you. As I mentioned, we have two studies, one on innovation and one on data in city government. And both of these focus on the Clean Sweep Initiative. And I also want to start by thanking all of you for your contributions to this work, from sharing your time with us for interviews, for scheduling, for hosting us in Buffalo last fall and also the summer before. We really see all of you as partners in this work, and I'm excited to hear your feedback on these early results. We began working in Buffalo back in 2019, which feels like forever ago, as part of the Cities Rise program. And when we first learned about the Clean Sweep program, it was clear that the program had so much intrinsic and really deeply personal value to so many of those that were involved. And after a few iterations, we designed two studies looking at the Clean Sweep program. We wanted to first understand how the Clean Sweep works, how it's able to overcome so many of the common limitations that governments face in achieving social impact. And then we also wanted to see if we could measure a quantitative impact of the program using administrative city data. And so the Clean Sweep Initiative we were interested in it because of, first of all, the goals of reducing blight and crime and improving well-being and engagement. These goals are not unique to the city of Buffalo. And the findings from this work, the lessons learned, we thought could be really valuable to other cities that are also working to tackle these really complex issues. Also, the number of sectors that are working together and the frequency, scale, and longevity of this collaboration are truly unmatched across other cities that we've looked at. And then there's substantial anecdotal evidence of impact of the program. And so we wanted to look at this further. And then taking an even bigger step back, city governments, as you know, are really at the forefront of so much public problem solving. And they're expected to act on really complex issues like racial injustice or public health emergencies, but are constrained by work that's often dictated around different departments or different bureaucratic silos within government, and also constrained by limited resources within government. And so departments often work to innovate, to try to do the best they can to achieve their goals with the resources that they have. But innovation within departments doesn't always yield the array of solutions that are needed to address persistent and boundary-spanning problems like crime and blight. So for example, working on, when I say innovation, I don't mean something that's like super high tech or like new to the world, but innovation meaning something that's really just new to the context, and trying to do something different to achieve a better outcome. And innovation within departments might be relevant for, like, for example, if you want to increase the response time on, or improve the response time on 311 calls, or if you want to increase the number of homes that are being inspected, that lends itself well to innovation within a single department. But to address these really boundary spanning problems, you really need boundary spanning innovation. And that's what the Clean Sweep does. It's through collaborative innovation, which is innovation that harnesses resources and creativity within and outside of City Hall to amplify the innovation speed and the range and quality of outcomes that are possible. So through this collaborative innovation during the Clean Sweep, participants are able to identify problems and make an impact and learn together. So what we wanted to know from our research was how can collaborative innovation during the Clean Sweep overcome some of the common challenges that city governments struggle with in order to achieve the desired social impact. And we also wanted to look at what are some of the trade-offs involved in working in such a collaborative manner. And to do this, we conducted interviews with many of you, with 23 city staff and 2 community leaders. We also held focus groups that were led by Debbie, Ms. Debbie and Ms. Ellen, on with residents and with community partners involved in the Clean Sweep. And we analyzed these interview transcripts for themes that were emerging from the interviews and focus groups. And just to put this in a kind of a framework, so we knew what were the inputs and activities going into the Clean Sweep, this multi-sector collaboration work, the beautification work that goes on, the outreach and education, the code and law enforcement work that happened, and we knew what the outcomes intended for the program were, which was, reducing crime, improving well-being, improving engagement with residents. But what we wanted to understand was how, like, what's the special sauce? What's the black box? What's the magic that kind of happens in between these inputs and activities and achieving this social impact? And through our interviews, we identified 3 mechanisms that really gets the Clean Sweep from the inputs and activities to the impact that it has. And the first was this co-production of services and duties. So this meaning that residents and partners within the Clean Sweep program work together with people from City Hall to co-produce delivering services and imposing duties. And the problem in many cities is that city departments are organized to apply technical or rule-based approaches to delivering services or imposing duties. Imposing duties like enforcing law or housing codes, or delivering services like letting people know about housing assistance or things like that. And these efforts often fall short of meeting citizens' complex circumstances and needs. However, during the Clean Sweep engages with citizens as potential partners who have assets to contribute, and this results in more effective and equitable service delivery and imposition of duties. So through the interviews that we did, we learned about how city staff engage with other departments, community organizations, and especially with residents to work together to co-produce the services and compliance, which makes the work much more effective and equitable. So I'll just share one quote that illustrates this, and this was from a code officer that says, you get an opportunity to see the bigger picture, whereas code enforcers, if you're in the midst of your daily duties and you see a violation, you might give a ticket and you're on your way to the next call. But with the Clean Sweep, you might talk to a person and find out this person's elderly, they don't have many funds, they're on the waiting list for a long time and they need help. That's going to change the nature of the interaction. We all work together and we try to find out what's the most appropriate service for this person. What we also found was that engaging with residents as co-producers impacts how residents view government and works to improve compliance and service delivery. So as a community leader said, I do have some complaints about the inspections piece of it because I have a few residents that had violations, but then they were really impressed because they found out the city is willing to help them. A second mechanism of really how the Clean Sweep works to achieve impact is through shaping the physical and social environment. And this by this I mean well, here, so the problem that many governments face is that government departments working alone are their work is often invisible to citizens, and it's often insufficient to sustain the types of improvements that they're seeking to impact. Um, During the clean sweep, this brings together many sectors to generate a highly visible impact on the environment, on the social and physical environment. And this demonstrates government's responsiveness to the citizens and builds the ability of citizens, individual and uh, builds the ability of individuals and communities to sustain the impact of the clean sweep program. Um, So what we learned through our interviews was that the Clean Sweep program generates a greater impact on the physical and social environment than sectors working alone. So for example, if not during the Clean Sweep, if a single tree on a street may be trimmed based on a work order, and that may be visible really only to the people who are facing that tree on their street. And they may not even know that it's city government doing that work because it's often contractors who, aren't in city uniform. And so this even though it's highly visible trimming a tree, it's often not visible that it's the city doing that work on behalf of the citizens. But during the clean sweep, that work is so visible to citizens that it's a city doing this work in a big way. Um, and so as one city staff person said, incremental change is generally how governments work. But during the clean sweep is different because in a small area, you do the majority of things all at once. Um, we also found through our interviews that seeing a change in the physical environment impacted social norms to help residents maintain a cleaner environment. So as one resident said, you know what the change was? The neighbors felt as though they were going to maintain it. Pride was developed because of the clean sweep. People took pride in the way the street was maintained, and now they know that's what they're expected to do. People often talked about how, that when there was so much trash, it was hard to feel like anything they did mattered. But once the big quantities of trash were removed, it was easier to then work to maintain it.
Okay,
Uh,
I have a quick
yeah.
comment. So, when if we have a question or if we have any comments that we may want to add, is that a good time just to do that, or you want us to wait?
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to chime in now. Yeah. And we'll also have time for comments later, but please throughout, feel free to stop me.
You used the example previous to this one in terms of the tree being trimmed and the physical, and I think that's correct. What also happens too is a lot of times if a 311 call comes in for trimming of the tree, when you have a clean sweep, maybe that tree root is damaging a street sign, and maybe the street sign is leaning or doing something, and maybe it's a couple of other things happening at one time that when you have the clean sweep you can all take care of it all at one time, as opposed to only just trimming the tree.
No, that's a great point. So it's like it's another example of where this like 1 plus 1 is more than two, that bringing together all these services at the same time is able to achieve like a better impact. That's better for the city and for the residents. That's yeah, thank you. I know I see actually taking note of that, and that's something that we want to add into this. Um,
I just took note of 1 plus 1 equals more than two. I like
great.
that.
Um, and others, feel free to chime in. Your thoughts are really important, and especially if you hear something that doesn't resonate with you, that you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense, or my experience is really different than what Kate's describing. Please speak up. Um, so we also found that while the impact of working together may be greater than working alone, it can still be insufficient to meet residents' needs or be insufficient to be sustained. So as one resident said during a focus group, the clean sweep made us smile for a minute, but as far as impact is concerned, it's us. After next weekend, it was back to normal. So I mean, it was a good gesture, but that's about it. It has to be long enough that the community takes over from there. And this was a sentiment we heard quite a bit of, where residents were overall pleased with what was done, but they felt like there was so much more that they wanted from there, and that it wasn't enough to make a longer term impact. Um, and then the third mechanism that we saw through the clean sweep was this collaborative cycle that the clean sweep really fuels, of expanding city staff's view of problems and solutions and improving their capacity to innovate. And the problem that many governments face is that bureaucratic or closed or incremental innovation doesn't yield the array of solutions that are needed to address these persistent boundary spanning problems like crime and blight and racial injustice, and the list goes on. Um, but the clean sweep opens up the innovation cycle to a variety of actors, and it taps into resources across different sectors. It overcomes professional norms that say, in this role, I really only do this, I don't do that, when really there's nothing written in stone that those people can't do that. So it overcomes some of the inertia of professional norms, and it creates broader social political support for new ways of problem solving. So one of the things that it does is facilitate learning across departments. As one city staff person said, there are additional synergies when you have everyone together, because oftentimes it's those side conversations. It's the, hey, wait, you have a problem with that house. I got a problem with that house also. But your problem may be from water or sewer line, and his is from a police issue, and his is from a building inspector, and his is from a neighbor. It's a how do you see the elephant type thing. Um, and I think this image illustrates some of the challenges of siloed work really well, where it's this parable of a group of blind people touching an elephant and saying they can't see the whole thing, so they touch a part of it and they think, oh, it's a snake, it's a tree, it's a rope. But during the clean sweep, you're able to see through everyone working together that like, oh, it's an elephant. We're all working together to see this. Um, and the other
Kate,
thing,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, just one thing. You mentioned, and this might be an example, in terms of doing this, and then other kind of innovations or other departments doing something. I know the Department of Inspections have now intensified and gone to do, I forgot what, proactive rental engagements, and so they'll take a building inspector along with maybe a community partner, and we'll do this on a different scale, right? So they weren't doing that before. And so that there's certain examples. I look at what the police department is doing with their net team, and when they do setups in the community, and they're bringing many of the clean sweep partners into areas, and then offering services there too. So we have, when you said that, that kind of resonated to me. I'm like, wow, from this, there's been a couple of other things that have happened.
Yeah, no, that's a great example, and something that we saw come up through our interviews as well, is that the innovation that happens during the clean sweep, and that's actually the next point. It doesn't just, it's not just innovation that occurs and is only done, only plays out during the clean sweep. The clean sweep also is kicking off innovation that occurs during times outside of the clean sweep too. And that's a great example, and something that we want to note of some of these programs that have evolved from the clean sweep itself. And an example we have from an interview with the city staff person, they said that, so now I know as a planner, okay, I'm going out to the census tract. I know from my visit during the clean sweep last year that they really need XYZ. So my planning project is less on their priority list. They want their street fixed and their landlord to be better, things like that. So it gives me more context to where the neighborhoods that I work in. So even just, that there's, the specific programs that have come out of the Clean Sweep program, but then also just the additional context that fuels the work that other staff do, and especially giving non-frontline staff the opportunity to get out into the neighborhoods and really see for themselves, and that impacts the work they do from their desks. And finally, collaboration has efficiency trade-offs. And so as one community organization representative said, the other thing is if you do it right, it's slower because we're engaging with the community. When you have a group of people meeting, it can be sloppy, a little unruly, but the product is so much better. And this is something we've heard reflected quite a bit, that that it is just a lot slower, and that a pretty significant trade-off in efficiency occurs, at least in the short term, during the clean sweep. Um, and so just to wrap up our main takeaways on our study about of innovation principles from the Clean Sweep program that we think can be applied to other contexts as well, that can be useful for other cities working to innovate in this space, or other spaces as well, is that what the Clean Sweep does really well is bringing staff really close to the problem, in order to see it and to co-produce the solution along with the people who are experiencing the problem the most. The second is that Clean Sweep works to experiment, to find solutions where this 1+1 is more than two, or bringing multiple people together isn't just bringing, four services together at the same time. It actually is something totally different when they're all together. And finally, that the learning doesn't just stay within departments, that the Clean Sweep is an opportunity for learning to occur across departments. And so I'm gonna pause there and take any questions or feedback or concerns that that you might have on this first study.
Hey, Kate, just a little bit of feedback. I wanted to let you know that analogy with the elephant really resonated with me, because we see that at every clean sweep, you'll have different departments looking at the same situation in a different way, and building off of each other's perspectives is how they solve the bigger problem. So I just wanted to, um, you know, I just wanted to let you know that resonated with me well, and I think that's essentially like the crux of what the clean sweep is about. It's about collaboration, working together, and solving the bigger problem, not just the symptoms, but but to find a cure. So.
Great. No, thanks for that feedback. Yeah.
I just had a quick question. Were you guys also going to cover kind of like the cleaning and maintaining of the green spaces? I think this year we saw a little bit more of that with the volunteerism side of it. But I just think the clean sweep followed off of that, the crime prevention through environmental design principles. A lot of like repairing abandoned buildings and those vacant lots. So I think like even board ups, we had some opportunities where real estate did some board ups to some abandoned houses out there. And then just the cleaning and maintaining of green spaces with the volunteerism of picking up garbage and debris throughout the area as well. So I was just curious where those different dynamics also going to be included as well.
Yeah, it's a good question. So our original study design, when we were trying to do a randomized control trial, was to look more closely at like sustainability of reduction of blight, and improving of green spaces and things like that. We weren't able to continue with that study for a variety of reasons. I think, challenges with staffing and sample size and things like that. And so unfortunately, we don't have measures of how efforts like improving greening change. But I think I'd be interested in that, but we don't know, what kind of difference that made.
Okay, maybe just to maybe extend that a little bit as opposed to looking at that quant quantitative. Yeah, okay. Let's get my right cue right. That when you talked about innovation, you talked about different departments coming together. What I also noticed was a willingness and an openness of various departments to accept different types of approaches or principles, right? So if you talk to any partner, they would know what septet is, or they would know that, as opposed to looking at it quali- quantitative, right? We were looking at it that, hey, wait a second, we were telling residents, or we were looking at it with a different approach. We were looking at even clean sweeps within the past couple of years more as a restorative practice, right? As opposed to something to say, I'm just be more punitive. And I think there's some offshoots of that too, as opposed to just measuring it. There was this an adoption in terms of how people saw the environment that they were going into.
Mm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, no, that's a great point. You know, there's so much that occurs during clean sweep that we, weren't able to capture in our interviews, and also so much that we captured in our interviews that we aren't able to like share during the presentation. But I think like the more qualitative uh impact that you're talking about, Oz, is so important. And I think, you could probably get a good sense of what the impact of that work has been by talking with those involved in this increased greening work.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. I have some questions just that I'll just put up here. If any of these like spur thoughts that you might want to share, like were any of these findings surprising to you? Do you find parts that were missing? Um, do you think these findings would be useful for other cities or more really just for the clean sweep? Is anything inaccurate?
Or well, I'll go first. And any important parts missing? I think Ryan kind of touched on that because we really have ramped up our volunteerism aspect this year. I think I've kind of brought that closer to how that relates to this study specifically. So that's one important part because we're getting the youth involved now too. So now it's the community taking care of itself. It's that building of capacity that we really try to frame in the clean sweep. Does it flow logically in the findings? Absolutely. It's an amazing presentation. I'm happy to hear how well the the program is doing, and I'm happy to hear the results of the evaluation. Um, Anything surprising? Not. I guess just like the efficacy. Like it's surprised. I didn't know we were having the level of impact that we've been having, but it's good to know. Um, Nothing really captured inaccurately from but Oz might have a better bird's eye view on that. And with these findings work in other cities, absolutely. When I was actually speaking to somebody who works for the county of Amherst, because my parents live out there now, and he had to go to the courthouse and everything. And basically just what do you do? They're asking me what I do. I tell them what I do, and they're like, wow. So like the programs that you guys are doing out there, even though that they don't necessarily need it because there's higher taxpayers, more money, and things like that out there. Um, I think everybody loves it, and we've seen people take the clean sweep formula, alter it a little bit and apply it to their own programs. Like even some of our partners, home headquarters, they're doing kind of a clean sweep program where they go door to door, improve quality of life. So I think that the findings that you guys are doing, you guys like putting this in words and making this digestible, is going to help a lot of cities. I think it could be very useful. But those are my 2 cents, and I'll pass it on.
Great. No, thank you, Michael. And I think you bring up an important kind of missed population that we didn't interview, which was these volunteers. And I think, now looking back and learning a little bit more now about the newer programs with including community volunteers, we should have interviewed them, I think, to get a better sense of what's going on there, because that is a missing piece. Yeah.
But it's a relatively new piece. Like it's this year, so it was after your study kind of had concluded. So it's not, yeah, you guys didn't miss anything. It's just something that every year we're trying to add to it. We're also having a digital impact as well, a bigger digital impact.
Okay. Okay. No, that's great to hear. And that's great. That's great too, because that was a piece that we heard quite a bit about from residents who had received clean sweeps, in the past, that they wanted something more sustained and more engaged with their neighborhoods. And so it's awesome to hear that you guys are already on it. So
Can I jump in for a second?
please.
Hi, everybody. So first and foremost, thank you for all the work that you guys did. I really enjoyed speaking to you, and what I liked best about everything that you did was the openness that we had with the partners and giving them the opportunity to, be a part of this. And I can't speak for anybody else, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed the clean sweeps anyway. But, we've noticed an uptake in people contacting us as an organization here, but also as Block clubs. So by putting that information in there, we are getting more feedback, and we're getting more calls here. And so now we're, able to help more people because the information is being passed along. but also it's come where the blog clubs are now people are starting to ask about it when they see that form, and we're getting a lot of calls and emails. So yeah, absolutely. I think this year, even going into this year, has been really great. And Michael's done a great job with everything. Everybody has. But just letting you know that it was important that you included us in on that whole question and answer that we did over at CAO. That was really great and very informative. And I like the way that you took everybody's wording and impacted it into your study. So on behalf of myself, I say thank you. And I definitely agree with Michael. This could work for anybody if they just do it right. They'll have to call Oz, of course, and he'll have to travel wherever. But he also knows he could take people with him. So I'm always volunteering to go. But
I got you. Hint, hint, I got you.
this is a great group of people, and they work very, very hard. And I also think too, and I'm going to stop after this. I've noticed more of an impact this year with everybody listening a little bit more and detailing things more so that we can get the help that's needed out there, and instead of just oh, okay, I'll take care of it or whatever, but it's being passed along immediately. And if it can be taken care of right then and there, it has been. So kudos to Oz and his team, and Michael, you guys are really staying on top of stuff. So that's just my opinion, and I guess I'm done now. Thank you for listening.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Debbie. I always appreciate your input. Great. Well, so for the sake of time, I want to make sure we have time to also cover the other study, and this is the second study is one where I really all of us are really interested in your feedback. So if it's all right, I'll move on to the next study. But if there's additional feedback that you have, feel free to put it in the chat or to reach out to me directly on email, and I'd love to hear it. All right, so the second study we have was on measuring the impact of the clean sweep on 311 and 911 reporting behavior. And so we wanted to measure the impact of the Clean Sweep program on crime, which is one of the goals of the program. In order to do so, the study took a few different iterations. And this was in large part because crimes are very underreported. An estimated half of crimes are not reported. And so using police reported data wasn't really going to get us to actual changes in crime. We also learned over the course of time about how the time horizon that it might take for an impact of the clean sweep to have on actual crime is much longer than the study period that we have. And so since we weren't able to measure the impact of the clean sweep on crime directly, we chose to focus on the impact of the clean sweep on something that we could measure, which was residents reporting behavior of calling the police through 911 or calling 311 for calls for service. And we saw this really as a measure of resident engagement most of all. So as you all know, this is a map of the city of Buffalo through the building blocks application on the left. Each dot is a property in the city, representing a unique property. Each of those dots we have a whole trove of data on, ranging from the number and type of police calls, 311 calls, building permits at each property, housing code violations, vacancy data, the home value, and census information about race and income. So we use that information along with data on where the clean sweeps had occurred between 2009 and 2021. We had to omit the years of 2014 because there wasn't enough data, and also the year of 2020 because of the pandemic. But we used data on where the clean sweep had occurred in over the course of these years, going back through tons of old logs that Oz and the team had kept. And we were able to match properties that received a clean sweep with clusters of very similar properties that did not receive a clean sweep for each year between 2009 and 2021. And we use a statistical technique called frontier matching to do this process. And so through this statistical technique, any difference that we saw in 311 or 911 reporting, we were able to attribute to the clean sweep itself. And included in the study were around 160,000 properties over the course of these many, many years, 30,000 properties that had received a clean sweep, and 130,000 properties that had not received a clean sweep. And so with this, in this matching process, there were more for each property that received a clean sweep, there were multiple properties that were matched to it that were very similar that did not receive a clean sweep. And so then we compared the properties that received a clean sweep and those that didn't in the 6-month period following the clean sweep. We unfortunately couldn't look further than 6 months out because then the next year of clean sweeps would begin, and that would impact the results from the previous year. So we only could look at 6-month time interval. We examined the 911 calls by looking at 911 calls for police incidents overall, and then we broke them down also by violent crime, property crime, disorderly crime, which is essentially drug crime, and then other crime. And then that was a standard classification system that we used. And then we also looked at all 311 calls, and we broke those down by the types of 311 calls that were related to the kinds of work the Clean Sweep does, like calls for tree trimming or trash removal. And then we also looked separately at the kinds of calls that were unrelated to a Clean Sweep. And this table shows the results of that study. And so the actual kind of risk difference that we saw between properties that received a clean sweep and those that didn't is in the middle column. Those with the asterisks are the ones where we see a statistically significant result. And those are also in bold. And then the third column, I've written in more kind of like plain English what the results actually mean. And so what we found was that there was no difference in reporting behavior between properties that received a clean sweep and those that didn't in the 6-month follow-up period for overall 911 calls and overall 311 calls. However, we did find a significant increase in calls for drug-related crimes when properties had received a clean sweep. And the result here was that there was 3 additional households per 1,000 households made 1 or more drug-related 911 calls in the 6 months following a clean sweep. And just to kind of ground this in what the kind of baseline number of calls that happen related to drug crimes. So in the absence of a clean sweep, on average, 8 households per 1,000 make 1 or more calls related to a drug crime. After a clean sweep, on average, households made 11 calls per 1,000. And then for the 311, we found that 5 additional households per 1,000 made 1 or more calls related to clean sweep type incidents in the 6 months following a clean sweep. And then to ground this in kind of what the baseline numbers are, in the absence of a clean sweep, an average of 62 households per 1,000 make 1 or more calls. And after a clean sweep, an average of 67 households per 1,000 make 1 or more calls. And then I just want to briefly summarize some of the qualitative data that we used from the interviews and focus groups that we did to try to understand these results. And then I want to have a discussion with all of you about what these results might really mean. So from our qualitative data, we heard a lot about how there were new positive interactions with the police that were generated through the clean sweep. And this resulted in a decreased fear of reporting incidents to the police, largely based on new knowledge about how to preserve anonymity through things like the anonymous tip line, or being able to talk to police directly, or having more of a personal relationship with the police. And also there were some kind of misconceptions or fear around reporting that police officers, through their conversations, were able to assuage. There was also a belief that residents described that because of the clean sweep, that they thought their concerns around crime in their neighborhood would be taken seriously and acted upon. And whereas before they might think like, oh, the city doesn't care about this that's happening in my neighborhood, or like the city might, I care about it, but if I call 911, no one's going to do anything about it. Now they think that it will be taken seriously and it will be acted upon. And finally, and I think this is a really big one, is an increase in trust. That through the opportunity to actually talk with police, especially in the context, and this was highlighted quite a bit, especially in the context of a lot of other staff, that this was an opportunity to, that people felt comfortable talking with police when there were other city staff involved. So it wasn't so obvious that they themselves were talking to a police person, and it just made for a much more comfortable environment to talk to a police officer. And there was an opportunity to really see their concerns addressed. So residents described how when they talked to a police person about a problem, then they were able to see it resolved, and that really improved trust. And for the 311 calling, we found that there was a lot of increased knowledge about 311, that a lot of people didn't know about 311, but then they're given these bags of information that include information about 311. And that through the clean sweep, they're able to see the city actually performing this work. And that increases the perception that government is effective and responsive, and that it's worthwhile to make a 311 call. And also that it increased feelings of personal efficacy in maintaining the physical environment. So not only did people report doing a little bit more of their part to make sure that their yard was clean, but when they saw things like, large dumping of waste by someone else, they felt like, okay, I know what to do. I can call 311 to have this taken care of. And so the key takeaways here are that the clean sweeps impact residents' willingness to engage with government through increased 911 and 311 reporting. And I know that was a bunch of information, so I'll pause there. And this is where, we are really interested in hearing your thoughts about what these results mean and why we might be seeing results like this.
Kate, I did want to mention there was Crystal put something in the chat that some thoughts from the previous slide that may even be applicable to here. So just wanted to make note of that.
Thanks, Oz. Yeah, I was just responding to your previous slide on basically highlighting the collaboration and how important it is. Obviously, we're all out there on the ground, but when you're in the midst of that, you don't understand the importance of, the different roles that people play and the different perspectives that people have. I really enjoyed the comment that came from the city staff of the planner that kind of just mentioned, now I understand what the priorities are and how to actually plan for our community. So I just wanted to highlight that. I thought that was very important, and it may be very useful for other cities as well.
It sounds like that was your quote.
I don't think it was me. It was a good one though. So thank you.
Yeah.
I saw Captain Champion kind of nodding his head, or kind of like, when you're talking about police data or whatever. I know he probably wants to jump in.
Yeah, I sure will. It's funny you saw that. But yeah, my initial thoughts were obviously, I'd like to see changes in violent crime statistics, and I'm kind of wondering, what is holding that up as far as getting more calls for service for that. However, I am also wondering if more people are utilizing the information for the confidential tip line as well, considering that it probably wouldn't register in the data if it were utilized in that capacity. Because that seemed like that was a big thing for some of the citizens. They were worried about, possible retribution in calling over some of the larger issues. But the most frequent thing that we heard from many of the citizens were things that fit into the things that we have, the I guess, upticks in responsiveness from the citizens, including the disorderly conduct and disorderly drug crimes, Um, so I guess that makes sense considering that's the thing that we heard the most feedback from as we went door to door on the clean sweeps.
Yeah.
Captain, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kate.
No, go ahead, Oz.
Captain Champion. I'm thinking about, you know, what you just said, but also a little bit about when they talked about innovation happening. I know, and maybe you can speak a little bit about something that you are and we are planning in terms of putting together a survey, and then um, talk about some of the other efforts that complements what we do with Clean Sweep or that were born from of that.
Absolutely, and I would say in general, even going door to door to make that connection with citizens, it's largely important, and we see that importance in some of those responses, from the citizens. But one of the things that we've been doing are outreach patrols by our neighborhood engagement team. They do outreach efforts where they go door to door in neighborhoods that have been affected by crime and or neighborhoods where we've had to do tactical actions like raids and things so that they can tell the citizens what exactly is going on and get feedback from them to make sure that the issue has been properly addressed. So it's very similar in some ways in that you're having that door-to-door face-to-face interaction, but it's very different as completely tailored to law enforcement. And it's also an attempt to try to get more feedback so that we can streamline our services and keep that connection with citizens. In addition to that, we're also trying to form a survey to get that improve that engagement and that outreach as well so that we can give that out to the citizens and get an idea of what their perception is of the police department and our efforts, and also gauge whether or not that we can get them more involved in the things that we're doing and in their willingness to be involved in what we're doing. So going forward, it's great to see that obviously things like the clean sweep are effective and that they're having an impact. And obviously we put a lot of effort into our engagement, and we're hoping to expand in the future.
Great. No, that's really good to hear. And and Captain Champion, I think your point about like not seeing impact of the clean sweep on violent crime or property crime. I think we expected at least to see some kind of impact on property crime with with the broken windows theory of like if we improve the reduce blight, then we might see less crime occurring around these properties. And then, also with violent crime, I think, we in reviewing the literature on this, we learned that violent crime is is one of the crimes that's most likely to be reported when it does occur. That drug crime is more or less likely to be reported when it does occur. And the other piece of this that we're trying to really unpack is that we actually don't know, this is reported crime, but we don't know if crime could have been reduced, like actual crime could have been reduced because of the clean sweep, but reporting of crime could have gone up during the clean sweep. And so you might see kind of like a washout effect because we don't know what the underlying level of crime actually is. All we can see is the measure of reported crime. And that's one of the challenges with this study is that, it could be the case that there's a lot less crime, but a lot more reporting of crime. So we basically see no change. Or it could be that there's no change. And we don't have a way of knowing that through this study.
Right, and as you said, I think that's a challenge with law enforcement, frequently is that a lot of the crime, and you can even argue that much of the crime is going unreported. So much of that we often find after the fact. So I can absolutely see that. That might take something a little bit more large scale and long term.
Yeah, and I think especially I would love to know your thoughts and others as well on the thinking about the magnitude of this effect. And so what we found was that for 911 calls that there were 3 additional households that made 1 or more calls per 1,000 households that received a clean sweep. And just thinking about in the 6-month follow-up period. And think from your perspective, it's a statistically significant change, but is it a meaningful change from your perspective?
I do. I think that is. I think any additional call that we can get helps us resolve an issue in the city. And oftentimes, even one call can help us resolve several different cases. as they're often interlinked. So any additions that we can have to people being more involved and being more responsive and giving more information for us to work with is absolutely useful for us. So yes, that actually is significant to me. So that's why I pointed that out, because that's one of the most frequent things we hear on the calls when we talk to people is they talk to us about some of the things like the activity that they're noticing around the neighborhoods and drug related things that they're noticing around the neighborhoods.
Great. That's really helpful to hear. I any other thoughts on that, and the 311 calls as well, which was 5 additional households per 1,000 making a call in that 6-month follow-up period related to clean sweep type activities.
Yep. So I'll hop in here for a brief second. It's funny because when the presentation was going on and we're finding that more people are making calls after the clean sweep with regards to crime at 311, my initial thought is that that's not a good thing. But you in the presentation is like, have explained well that that's just capacity building. That's people knowing that not only can they trust the police with these calls, but they know that what 311 is capable of handling and why those calls are increasing. So I just wanted to speak briefly to that, that I think that this is actually good. And what we want is more people to trust calling the police, more people to trust calling 311, and that their issues will be resolved. So those are my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Michael. And something that I didn't discuss enough in the presentation is that, the mechanism we actually really don't know. So like we're hypothesizing based on the qualitative interviews that there's an increase in reporting because of increased trust, because of good things. But it's possible that actually crime is going up in the neighborhoods that get a clean sweep, or service needs are going up in the neighborhoods that get a clean sweep. We think it's unlikely based on the data because we have this qualitative data, but at face value, if you're just looking at the quantitative data, that's a great point that, the first reaction can be like, wait, why is the clean sweep causing crime to go up? And why is it causing service needs to go up? But then what's like, when we think more about like, what does calling the police mean? What does calling for 311 actually mean? That it's not actually measuring crime per se, or the underlying service need per se, but really, as we're trying to understand it, it's a measure of resident engagement, and kind of trust in the efficacy and responsiveness and equity of city government.
You took the
Oh,
words right out of my mouth. I'm sorry, Oz. You took the words
no,
right out of my mouth, because oftentimes people will see that as if, there's as if crime is increasing, but if I do my job effectively, if our guys do our job effectively, then the result is going to be more citizens calling 911 because of the trust built. So yeah, absolutely. That's a great point.
and I was going to echo that. I was going to say that somebody who has probably been um, associated with 311 the longest here, we see that, right? Where I put down the level of challenge requires a different level of effort, right? In some communities more so than things, well, what is that level of effort? And we see that when we go in there, there are times where we will get more 311 calls. And something Captain Champion said when you made the correlation with 911 calls, I'm going to also echo with 311 calls. The more calls we get, because there are sometimes connections, that people who are living next to each other or that may see, that's better for us, right? And we see that, as opposed to people think, oh, okay, it's just somebody that's calling, as long as they're connected in some type of way, and we make this premise, that's why we're here, because we bring so many different partners to be connected. And we really rely on them to follow up with those particular connections. So 311, or to follow up on those, or the increase of that, tells me there's more of a willingness to be participatory, to say, hey, I want to be able to do something, instead of just sitting back and saying, nothing's going to change, or that's going to happen, or they don't really care any old way. So I think there's something to say.
Great. No, thank you, Oz, and Debbie, thank you also for your comments and being here.
Hey, can you put up the statistics again, or
Yeah.
I think it was the slide right before this one, or
See if I can.
and thank you for, I know when we first met, when we went through this, I it definitely looks like you've tinkered with this and that, and so thank you for that. I was I initially when I looked and I saw there were no change, I'll go to I'll talk speak to that. I was like, what do you mean there were no change with violent crime or property crime? But I kind of get it now a little bit. And I don't know if anybody else had that particular perspective. We talked about where we thought there was significant change, but maybe where with 311 or 911, did you guys think that there would be more of a change, or you would think that would be consistent with there was there would be significant change or some change?
And I'll chime in. I definitely thought it would have been a significant change to the property crime and the violent crime. I just think based on the approach of the clean sweep, literally going to every door, knocking on each door and explaining to each resident, different programs that are out there, but the effective use of the 311 database system. I know myself using it in my septet trainings and um, teaching them from a perspective of using the 311 database system creates that paper trail so that they can go back to from an accountability perspective from government and the community. I thought it would definitely be a significant change in violent and property crimes, as well as even all police incident types as well.
And Ron, just building on that, like what kind of time horizon would you expect to see that also in the 6 month follow-up period?
For me, yes, and I think just because of the nature of the septet program itself, right? These people are coming together and we're doing the 8-hour training, and from there, they want to make specific design changes to their communities, and so they're talking about blight, they're talking about things that have been neglected within that area. And my first initial response to them is put these into 311 database system so that the different apartments are made aware. It's following the structure of what's already been created through the 311 database system and then being able to push those out to the different various departments to get those changes made. I would immediately expect from the moment the 8-hour training is over to the next few weeks that they would have been making calls per anything that they saw within their community that they felt like needed the city's attention towards.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's really good to know. And that program, how long has that been in effect?
So it's been around. We reestablished it again since I've come in a year, and we've pushed that from last July until current now. But if I'm not mistaken, I think it's about 2 to 3 or 4 years it's been going about.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good to know. And this analysis stops in 2021, so it wouldn't capture,
Right.
this last year. And it is combining data from 2009 to 2021. And so it maybe there could be a bigger impact happening in those more recent, like in the last 2 years, for example.
Right.
But we just don't see it in this overall analysis.
No, understood.
Yeah, we did look specifically to see if there was a difference in because we also know that the way the clean sweep operates is different between 2009 and 2021 for in a variety of capacities. And so we did look like kind of splitting it up into two separate like more recent and more historic data. And we didn't see an increase of reporting in violent or property crimes in that, but it also may be that if we did the study again in a couple of years and just looked at the last 5 years or something, that it might very well be different, but we just don't know.
No,
Um,
thank you for that, Kate.
I would also like to chime in as well. I became a little curious about this as we were, going through the different statistics. If there was a way that we were able to keep track of the amount of police-related issues that were resolved on the actual clean sweeps, like during the actual clean sweeps as well. Because as I know, and many other partners know, we've often had to resolve issues right on the spot during the actual clean sweep. So I thought that was a pretty significant thing as well to be associated with the data here.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. The other thing I should say is that so we excluded police incidents on the day of the clean sweep, and we excluded 311 calls in the week after the clean sweep. And that was in large part because we know that a lot of the 311 calls are entered by city staff, directly following the clean sweep, and so we wanted to capture like true resident reported 311. And then we also, for that same reason, we didn't include the police calls during the clean sweep itself because we wanted to look at like resident reported. Um, However, I think you bring up a really good point, Kevin Champion, about, we're not measuring I think, especially for police incidents, it'd be interesting to know how many police incidents occur during the clean sweep that are resolved.
Right,
And that's not captured here,
right,
at least the ones that occur on that day.
right, and or incidents that were, the police initiated contact was made and the police officers provided, so rather they reported those incidents and it was followed up on another date.
And would a police incident be generated from that? So like if someone, said they were having problems with drug activity outside their house, would and then, an officer went by a week later to try to see what was going on, would that result and let's say there was drug activity, would that result in a police incident?
Right, in certain situations specifically, that would happen, and some that there wouldn't. Like for example, we get tons of information about suspicious activity going on at a house, and then that's later forwarded to detectives to investigate and or CPOs to investigate. And we have some other situations where we actually call services out at that moment, rather it be dog control, rather it be whoever else or CPO or an officer from that actual district to address that issue right on the spot. So I'm a little curious, how that would work into how that would be reflected in the data as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so like, yeah, something we could look at is like if we included the day of as well. Um,
Right.
and then I think is another part of what you're saying too, that not only is there kind of like underreporting of actual crime, but maybe underreporting of like resolution of crime, if not all of those um, incidents might result in a police incident. We're just using data from the department on incidents that are like tagged as a drug crime occurred. But
Right.
perhaps if like, a K-9 team was sent out to investigate or whatever, like unless and I don't know enough about the process, but it it sounds like it's possible that a incident might not be logged necessarily in each case. Is that correct?
Right. And or the incident is logged and there's no resolution until months later down the line. Because
Okay.
some things result in long-term investigations to be able to until the police can actually take action. Many of which are, drug houses and things where actual surveillance and other things are necessary before action can be taken.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about the timeline here too, as far as the 6 month follow-up? Like, um, would you expect that some of this work that the Clean Sweep does would have an impact in 6 months? Or do you think most of it would happen after 6 months, or hard to say?
Again, it's going to vary. Um, considering the procedures and law, obviously legal obligations and restrictions. Each situation is going to be completely different. Certain situations are going to be able to immediately be directly addressed at that moment, or possibly in the month or weeks that follow. In some situations, it might even might be long term, just as I said, something more complex where it might take a more long-term investigation, something like a drug house or drug operation, in which we need, tons of evidence to be able to proceed. That's going to take a long a long time. It's going to be it might even be longer than 6 months in some situations. In some situations, will be a day or a day or two.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oftentimes, with community policing, at least, I think that's one of the effects of community policing is that we can oftentimes give people immediate satisfaction on some of these things, on some of the smaller quality of life issues. And again, it can change as well. Some of the property issues that people have, that becomes more of a legal thing where we have to work with the courts to be able to address that, and that might be a little bit more long term. So it varies.
Hmm. Hmm. Great. No, that's really helpful context for us in trying to understand the results as well.
And Captain Champion that said it too. When you're talking about reaffirming residents' expectations, not just with law enforcement, but also with housing related issues, because there's a little bit of a similarity in terms of if they're living next to a house and the conditions. There are some times where we can do an immediate impact. We may have the mayor's impact team, or maybe there's even a shorter, more impact, but when it goes to housing court with a different entity with and it takes a little longer, depending on the severity of the house or the type of situation or whatever conditions there is. um the follow-up that we have with the residents, or the one-on-one of communicating with them, or the reassurance or of the expectations, to me is very, very important. And sometimes you just can't get that by calling somebody, or then you wait somebody to call them back, and it ain't the same it's not the same person who's calling them, as opposed to one-stop shop there at that level of expectation. Again, not speaking for what happens with law enforcement, but I see that happening a lot of times with housing concerns per se, where we get that.
It's very true.
I know we're over time. I also want to ask if Ashley or Jessica, if you have any additional questions that you want to pose to the group here.
Nothing from me, but I just wanted to thank everyone for your feedback. This is super helpful, and it's really just good to hear from you, and you know, really helpful to help us interpret our results and make sure that the way we're talking about this is true and accurate. So thank you very much.
Yeah, nothing from me either, Kate, but I did. There was one part of the discussion earlier, Ron, you had a question about cleaning and greening coming out in the study results. And I just wanted to point out that in kind of solution 2, where we're talking about this like very visible impact of the city's work, I think that is very related to all of the blight reduction work that happens. So just wanted to make a little clear that connection there. And also,
That's a great point. Yeah, I can just put that up. Yeah, I think, one of the biggest pieces, like you said, Ashley, is this highly visible work of the city that happens.
but this
Right.
has been very helpful today. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or
Yes,
questions,
hi, this
concerns?
is Ellen. I just wanted to chime in. I was just listening today, but I'm glad to see that the outcomes had some changes, and actually that residents felt more comfortable responding to 311 calls. And during our surveys, we found that too. People felt like they were more comfortable doing the clean sweeps, sharing information. So I'm just thankful to see that, some of the outcomes of the community resident focus groups had some positive feedback and outcomes, and I'm looking forward to seeing more. Thank you for the presentation. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Ellen.
And I'll hop in as well. Great presentation. Just to piggyback off Ellen, thank you for the amazing work you guys did in helping us evaluate the program, improve the program. Without you guys, it wouldn't be where it is today. So I very much appreciate it. Also, briefly, I was introduced. This is our new AmeriCorps Vista member. His name is Aaron Adams. Yes. And he's actually taking over for Colin. So we got a new Save Our Streets program, Vista in the mix, and just wanted to not be rude and introduce. This is why I wanted him to sit in and glean off of everybody's experience. But thank you again, everybody. Great meeting, and I look forward to seeing you again. And also give Eleanor my love. I had the brief opportunity to talk to her this morning.
Oh, good. This morning. That's wonderful. And great to meet you as well. Yeah, and Eleanor, I should say, she has done all of the hard work of gathering all the data and analyzing all of this data that we presented based on the reporting behavior. She unfortunately couldn't be here today because she's about to start a PhD program in economics in London, at Oxford, so she won't be able to join us. But her work is really embedded throughout all of what I presented. Great. Any final thoughts? And of course, this isn't the last opportunity for comments, so you can always reach out to us and chat at any time.
Okay, we're gonna have to get you a little video or something that I'll put with your PowerPoint. I want to say thank you very much. I've said this before, and I think this was a good forum, hopefully, just to get some feedback and also to build some capacity. Probably in the near future, we'll have you guys come back on where I hope to make a presentation to my direct report. And the executive team, the mayor and the deputy mayors, and let them know. But that's a little near into the future. But if there's any other thoughts and comments, feel free to share with Kate and Ashley and Jessica. I think for me and being at my perch, I want to say thank you to the partners and to you guys for being a part of this. Thank you to the team at Harvard. Something that was just an idea because we wanted to be more responsive to residents in the community, and looking at data and information turned into many years of this someone peeking, prodding, and looking underneath the covers to see that we think we're doing something that's innovative, but I believe we're just being more responsive, and I think that's where innovation comes, listening to people in the community. So this has been a great journey, and it's going to continue to be. Again, I can't say thank you enough, Kate, with you and the team that from Harvard, and looking forward to where this will take us and how this may help other cities, other residents, other administrators or professionals, civic-minded folk in their respective communities as well as ours.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Oz, and thank you to everyone on this call, and also to the many others who have contributed who aren't here. And we'll be taking the show on the road into Chicago to present it at a conference in 2 weeks. And Oz and Ellen and Micah will be there as well. And so yeah, we're looking forward to that. But yeah, we'll be in touch. Reach out always, and hope to see you and talk to you all soon.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.